Animators and artists. Pat Keegan is a storyboard artist and animator who has won awards for eye-catching work across TV, film, and animation. With more than a decade in the industry working on cult series like Rick and Morty, as well as Intergalactic, which premiered on Netflix last month, we invited Pat onto our live stream show and tell to discuss his 3D scenes made using Storyboard Pro. Pat, welcome to the stream.
Thank you so much, Mike, for having me. I appreciate the opportunity to chat about Storyboard Pro.
All right, well, why don't we get into it? Pat, how would you describe the work that you do, and what does a typical day look like for you?
Well, I currently work in TV animation, which is a different pipeline than feature. And mostly, I guess, I'm going to bore people with the day-to-day of a storyboard artist, but it's, you get your script and you're kind of building like a blueprint for the animators. You take the script and you're visualizing it, trying to get some jokes out of it, or, I work in prime time, so it's always like, here, create the stage, don't step on the jokes with any fancy acting or camera work. And basically, from then on, it's like revising and, plussing it until your deadline hits, and then you do it all over again for the next episode. And then you die.
That's refreshingly positive.
Yeah.
So Pat, what was your journey to becoming a storyboard artist like?
Well, I started out like most newcomers in the industry, where I was trying to do everything. It was my portfolio was morbidly obese. It was character designs, it was storyboards, it was background designs, and this was like early 2006 through 2012 before I got into industry. All my artwork was done via a wonderful website called Craigslist, which, this was like the boom of the internet becoming a place where people were writing articles, and news outlets were finally starting to utilize the internet. So every writer and journalist wanted like their picture drawn or it's like their picture illustrated. And so that's kind of how I survived for about 6 years doing that nonsense. And eventually I found an ad for a little movie called Anomalisa. They're looking for a story artist. And I met with the producer Rosa Tran and the director Duke Johnson. And I don't think I had any like actual storyboard portfolio pieces, but it was just me bringing everything, like a sketchbook of like zoo sketches, and just to make the interview as uncomfortable as possible, a giant sketchbook full of like nude male figure drawings, which is not a way you should probably go into an interview for somebody. And I think they just saw like, oh, he's a good draftsman, he could probably do this job. Plus, we don't have a lot of money, and he seems like he's cheap. So I got that job, and eventually, if you're on a job, and if you're not, can I curse? I was about to say curse.
Yeah.
As long as you're like not an asshole and you do good work, you get the next job, and eventually you kind of ride that for as long as you can. And once you're in, it's kind of a little bit easier to get the next one, because this industry is so incestuous. You'll know somebody on that one who's now over here, and they remember you, and you reach out to them. It's, it's kind of like that. I don't know if that answered your question. Your pauses after every time I answer something are very daunting. It's like, oh my God, did I answer
There's a little bit of latency. Okay. One thing you mentioned Craigslist. I love like the sort of senior internet of like the 2006 sort of era, when that's where you'd find jobs.
Yeah. And anything you want.
I talked to a lot of artists who like their early experience into animation is through websites like Newgrounds, sort of pre-YouTube. I always really enjoy remembering that the landscape of the internet has changed a lot. So artists who follow our live stream might be familiar with Storyboard Pro's features for importing 3D objects into scenes, and that's not what you did. So Pat, what led you to build elaborate scenes using 2D drawings?
Importing 3D objects into Storyboard Pro is like super, it's much more efficient, but aesthetically, it's not great, at least for me. It's kind of like seeing like a live action movie, and you can like tell they're on like a green screen set. The elements just don't mix. I can actually show you what I mean in regards to that. Am I currently sharing?
Yes.
Okay. Let me see. So I did a little test here. You can tell, like, when I bring in this cliff thing, it just looks like this big gray mess, this blob thing, and it just wasn't working. And you kind of are limited with, you know, the texture and the color of 3D objects when you bring them in as either like a .obj or .fbx. So it's like so crushing to think like, oh, this is all I have to work with. You know, sometimes like for this, you can bring in a 3D object and you can manipulate it to do what you want. You kind of can bury it behind all these elements so it doesn't show the big gray mass that it is. So that led me to dig more and more into, you know, I want this to be kind of look like a 2D thing. And how I started with that is kind of parallaxing or multiplaning stuff, which I don't know if that's your next question, but I can show you the kind of, you know, the lineage of this graduated to this, and eventually you're building these sets in 2D. So this was
Let's dive in.
Sure. This is an exploratory thing. Like I always wanted to do like, what if like a 2D movie or animated show had like a long one take shot, like a Scorsese or Paul Thomas Anderson movie. And this was kind of like my Scorsese. Of course, we just add a little the Rolling Stones, and it kind of has that feel to it. And this was all done in Storyboard Pro, but it's all just like manipulating layers and the camera, which was, you know, limiting. And eventually then you graduate to something a little bit more dynamic. But what multiplaning is good for are these dramatic, very limited camera moves where something can move in front of the camera. And the same with this, you know, you get a little bit more detailed, a little bit more elaborate. I'm just going to go through a few more of these exploratory things, and I keep finding limitations because everything kind of looks a little fake. It doesn't look 3D. You can see it's like 2D objects moving, and eventually you get to. Then I realized, oh, if I just keep adding more and more things in the background, eventually you can almost create like a 3D environment, which led me to what I really wanted to for was like a project I was working on where I needed to fly like through buildings. And this is all done through Parallax, but I realized like, what if I want to like turn down one of these alleys? How am I supposed to do that without, you know, it seems like a nightmare to do it with just like flat 2D images. Did I just ramble? Was anything in that rambling an answer to anything?
I think that was a great answer. I mean, so looking at like parallaxing and like the multiplane camera, those technologies have existed since like the 1940s and a little bit before in some other films too. But you know, in Storyboard Pro and Harmony, the multiplane camera was really made to kind of simulate those effects that were used on, you know, those films like Pinocchio, where you have those like really deep multiplane shots. And it's interesting to see you took the tools that we provided for doing that and took it a little bit further.
Yeah, and then, like I said, it was a matter of I see all these elements and I was only using the hierarchy of the layers. And then for whatever reason, I never had used the stage layer and then or view. And I clicked on it and then saw like everything there's a different hierarchy in regards to the distance from the camera. And there's like the stage. It's called stage layer, of course, stage view. Of course it is. And then I realized like, oh, well, what if I just turn this thing? Oh, that looks like a wall. If I turn this downward, that's a floor. And eventually like, oh, I have a room. And I can move the camera in and out. And I mean, it's pretty pathetic that was exciting. But for me at the time, it was exciting. I'm like, hey.
I mean, I think what's cool and you have an artist who has a set of tools, and then they look at the tools and realize, wait, I can use this differently. I find that really exciting.
Yeah, I mean, anyone not in the art world would be like, really? That's what you got excited about? But it was like an aha moment. As I said that out loud, but it actually was like, oh my God. Or holy shit, look what I can do. This is what I was kind of searching for in the other programs like Maya. And speaking of those ones, which is kind of, they have a relationship with Toon Boom in regards to, I've always been searching for how to do 2D in these 3D environments. I can show you some tests I've done in Maya, which basically it's the same kind of thing that bringing a 3D object into Toon Boom is. It's just like this gray monster of a thing, which kind of lacks in textures and colors. You kind of are stuck with whatever you can use. You can't really manipulate the colors or the textures, but they give you lighting, which is one thing Toon Boom lacks, is lighting. Kind of, you have to paint your own lighting in Toon Boom, which I'll get to. This is another test in Maya. As you can see, like everything is just, that the grayscale and the caging of the objects, which was closer to what I was going for, because it kind of gives it a 2D, skin. And then this is Blender exploratory and grease pencil. But what I found with grease pencil is it's really difficult to like manipulate the pencil. You have all these axes and it's turning, and it's like really frustrating if you don't really get a good handle on it. And this is a result of something of that, which I realized like, oh, then I love the pencils and pens of Toon Boom. I wish I could do this in Toon Boom. I don't know why I'm showing you Blender stuff in a Toon Boom demonstration, so I apologize. Please, what was the next question? Sorry. I was just promoting different software on your software show.
I think you showed us. So you showed us the 2D parallax effects that you're using Storyboard Pro, and then the sort of attempts to do sort of 2D, 3D for your animation using Maya and Blender. So maybe this is a good time to talk about what you landed on in Storyboard Pro with the scenes that you shared.
Yes, let's do that. So building 2D sets. So this is a final product of Toon Boom that I've just using 2D drawings on.
And specifically Storyboard Pro, correct?
Yes, I'm sorry. From here on out, it's all Storyboard Pro. Go to hell, Maya and Blender. So this is all just like drawings on planes, and you just have to manipulate them. You're kind of like a carpenter, because if I show you the work for this, you'll kind of get a good idea. Like this is just a very raw version of that, and it's me kind of exploring with the camera after building a little bit of the sets, figuring out like what kind of cool shots I can have. I think this was inspired by a movie I was working on called Magician's Elephant, which comes out soon on Netflix. It's kind of that world where I had a lot of scenes going down like the town square. So I'm like, is there an easier way to do to do this rather than drawing everything over and over again? This is another generation of that where I keep adding more and more elements. Now I have two sides of the street and so forth, and eventually you land on a grid. You gotta love a grid. Another thing to be weirdly excited about, because grids are always great in regards to they're going back in the z-axis, so it always looks like there's motion and depth.
Yeah.
So always,
and they show you a sense of place.
Of course. Good color commentary, Mike. Perfect. You picked me up there. Yeah, so I'm going to show you more and more ways to use a grid because they're your best friend. If you want to just add the tiniest bit of depth or dimension to even like a still image. Next one is a problem that I ran into. This isn't a 3D set. These are all drawings that I animated to try to get like a 3D effect. and it's kind of like a person walking out of a train, and all these pillars or columns kind of cross the screen. And I realized after like a day of work, like this is a nightmare. You can't possibly like animate it to look smooth even as quickly because the timing's all off. You kind of have to like a layer motion and keyframes. So then I landed on this after building all these sets. This is all done in Toon Boom as well, where you're not gonna, you can draw or animate your background, but you're never gonna get it to be like smooth and look nice. And as plain as it may look in this, you can always like spruce it up with some color correcting. This was for like a horror show that I was working on. It kind of gives like an eerie sense. The camera is kind of just like watching this person, and it never would have been able to do something like that if you're animating the background by hand, because just you don't get that smooth, creepy feel. And this is the project I was going to show you actually in the program. And this is just a basic like sci-fi street. This is the first generation, like trying to get an idea of like flying through the sci-fi street, but this is like the first test of whether or not I could do it. And you can see these are all just lines that we go back and forth. And you just add a little bit more, and therefore now you have more of a stage to add a little bit more of a dynamic camera. You can swing it around and point it at different things, and things kind of stay in perspective. That's the beauty of the stage. And you build these sets because everything, it's a stage. I keep saying stage over and over again, but that's what I was hoping for, where I didn't have to turn the camera and then have to do like a timed layer transform on this, so it kind of turns. But with everything built in a set, you can keep pushing more and more, and you can add shading and different colors, so there's a little bit more depth. But the thing with, get back to this one, you kind of have to paint your own lighting in there. One thing Toon doesn't do is cast shadows. So if you want shadows, you kind of have to draw that on these objects yourself, whether that's like a windowsill that casts a shadow underneath, or basically any object. To get back to this one, yeah, so basically these are all just lines that live on one another, and you just manipulate them using the stage to either face forward, face down, whatever you want it to do to look like it's an actual street. And then you can like throw, this is with the rough animation of what I was going for, where I wanted these characters to fly through this space. And the thing about Toon Boom, which I'll get to in the demo, you kind of have to build the set and then rig your camera and then like export it, because it's going to be impossible. It's going to chew up your processor if you kind of do this in the file itself. I wouldn't recommend that, because your mental health will deteriorate extremely quickly if you try to do all this in the program. So you kind of export this, bring it back in with your camera. You can have a little guide to follow your camera, whatever you want to do to make sure your camera's set up, and you just animate on top of that. It's a long-winded way of doing it, but it's a much more efficient way of doing it.
Yeah, I think it's a pretty typical approach for 2D, 3D projects.
Let me show you that kind of the same idea I was going for, but with bringing objects in, and you can see the difference, what I'm talking about. Let's unpack this. Come on, processor. Give me a moment. My computer is thinking.
Yeah, it's always fun when the live stream is pulling on, the RAM, and Storyboard Pro is pulling on the RAM. There's only so much RAM to go around.
This has so little left. So this is kind of the same idea. Let me go in the camera view, and it's like the same idea, but it's using these 3D objects. So you can tell it just doesn't have like, let me throw my little guy up there.
Doesn't feel hand drawn.
No, it kind of feels, I mean, it works for what you want to do. And this is perfect for like previs. If you work in live action and like any of the superhero genre, I know a lot of people who do that, where you're kind of just trying to get an idea. But for like an actual living background that I was going for, it wasn't doing it. Now this is kind of like how it was in like Batman the animated series. I mean, I know it's sacrilege to talk about that, but that's kind of what they were using. And looking back now, you can tell, but it just wasn't. It wasn't a good look of what I was going for, like, because everything was gray and you can't change the colors, and it just looks so rotten. That's why, these are great in a pinch, but if you want to build your 2D sets to look like they're actually a part of the world that you're going for, your characters, I suggest you draw them yourself. What else did I have here? Let me close this. Nope. So I'll get into, let me just show you that train station, how that's laid out.
It's a really cool scene.
The train one?
Yeah. No, I really enjoy that one.
It was, like I said, like I spent a day and a half trying to animate these lines. And like, this is ridiculous. And you're getting yourself sick by trying to work on this, and you're a mess. And then I realized, like, let's just animate this with stage. So then you see, let me go to stage here. Everything is it's just a set. One thing I would suggest is just name look at all these layers. I mean, you can find them if you like toggle on them, but if you don't do a good job naming, you're going to get lost, and especially if you build an elaborate set. So I suggest name your things as specifically as you possibly can. And then
it's a good tip. I'm pretty bad for like layer 1, layer 2, layer 23.
Certainly, I am too. But as soon as then I realized like I have to find one. I have to go back and name everything. Working in TV animation,
it's really important.
You have directors who are very anal about that. So it's kind of something I learned in this industry, so I don't get fired. I don't know what else to explain. It's hard to do a demo on this one. That's why I was going to show you the other one, because this is everything in this stage kind of has like a face, so you can't kind of see through it. So it's hard to show you exactly how it all works. For this, I just wanted to show you what like an end product might look like of like a stage. Like I keep saying the word stage, but it's exactly what it is, and your camera can move in and out. So let's go to, so this is that kind of like cyber city setup that I had. And you'll see it's just it's lines. You draw a line, you kind of tip it over and run it through the Z axis. Then you have like a sidewalk, and you manipulate that, duplicate it and all that. And then you'll see, move your camera through, and it's essentially all this is just lines that live in this space, but it kind of, you arrange them in the right way. They look like it's a living 3D space that you're flying through.
Yeah, what I really find interesting about this is just how like you are brute forcing making a 3D scene using individual drawings that you drew in Storyboard Pro is wild to me.
It's probably not the most healthy approach, because like I said, it's extremely tedious, especially if you get more and more elaborate, because you might not be satisfied with just like a wall that has a window that doesn't, extend out, look 3D itself. So then you have to go in and like the sill front will have to be a layer, the sill side, just so everything looks and moves in perspective and dimension as you go past it, under it, over it, wherever.
Every boring box you have to draw 6 sides for.
What's that?
Every
Every
like
box.
box or a rectangle, like cube, is 6 sides you have to draw.
Exactly. And that is, just saying that out loud over and over again because everything is a box. The trouble with this,
How many drawings is that?
oh God, too many. Probably hundreds.
Okay, I'm honestly impressed that Storyboard Pro has not crashed.
That's the good thing about when you use just lines and you don't like use a brush that
Yeah, it's
is,
all vector.
yes, it does. It's much healthier for your machine and it's able to process at a reasonable rate. Because then you start
I just want to
adding.
highlight, like, this is storyboarding software. This is not software designed for like creating elaborate 3D scenes. You managed to do it. I'm hats off to you. I'm impressed. Um, this is wild.
It's a cool thing, and I feel like um, maybe the more and more you play with it, and the more tools that you guys throw on top of it, it'll become a little bit more expedient and able to do this at a much more quicker pace because it's hard to be part of a production if you do something like this because it's so tedious and it's just going to drive everyone out of the industry if this is like their job to.
I was going to ask you, I have to ask you, is this something that you've used on a production, like these skills, this sort of tool, or is this more for personal projects?
These have all been personal. I can see it being implemented like at a very smaller scale in regards to, I know some productions like Bob's Burgers, they have, I think they use SketchUp where they'll build the set for like, the most commonly used backgrounds, whether it's the burger place or the Belcher's house. So then you just bring in that model, I guess. I'm not sure exactly how they do it, but it's just easy to take snapshots of your background so your artists aren't constantly drawing the same backgrounds over and over again. They can focus on other things, but it's the same idea. This does everything that Blender essentially will do, or Maya. But the thing is, the lighting, like I mentioned, and like texturing. Like you can't really texture map this so it looks like a real building or whatnot. It has, you kind of have to draw every little nook and cranny or crack or anything, and that adds more and more time and more processing power. The more I talk about it, it's kind of like, well, I'm dissuading people from using it. So I think we should stop showing that and show them the simple way of
Let's
doing
talk
it.
about like what you enjoy about this. Like, what do you enjoy about seeing your drawings in 3D space?
It's mostly because I assume like most story artists, I'm like obsessed with like cinematography and composition and motivated camera movements. Working in primetime animation, I've kind of been like suppressed of that because we don't really do that other than a little bit of like parallaxing or multiplaning. So it's almost like I'm going home after work and just kind of like revolting or against the system to do everything I thought I could do because I love
Going from like flat composition to like, hey, you know what I want to do? I want to have like a crane shot come in and then swoop
yes,
into a truck, going deep into this scene. Yeah, I get it. That's awesome.
like I wanted to like kind of do things that I love in live action, whether it's like a long single take or like an Aaron Sorkin walk and talk where they walk down a hallway for a while and they turn, like things that you don't normally see in animation, which we can do, we just don't. So I was like, oh, let me just explore if it's even possible and maybe show people that you can do it, so it'll allow for more dynamic camera in the medium. This is all 2D as I talk about it. It's not 3D is already exists because you have a digital camera and digital sets. So this is kind of, I'm exploring for the sake of 2D animation and 2D backgrounds. So I know people say, we already do that in 3D, but shut up. This is about 2D.
I mean, it kind of is 3D, but it's like 3D that you built by hand, line by line. Um,
Exactly. And
I really enjoy seeing these scenes.
I had hair when I started this, which is just testament of how frustrating it can be and daunting and discouraging sometimes it can be. It's just, but the end result kind of pays off, and it gets me to, when you deal with such minimal things like a line, you kind of have free range to do whatever you want. You can build even the slightest things. I had an idea to the left mid sentence there. I had a comment about that, but let's just move on. And I thought, if I simplify this, you can get a good idea of how it's actually done. Because this is, of course, this is a longer version, and this is more elaborate than you probably need it to be if you want to implement it into your own little projects or pipelines. So, I can show you the really simple version of this, and then as soon as you get those tools, then you build a little bit more, spend a little bit more time on this, and eventually you have like this really cool set that you can use your guys on, or whatever the hell you want to do with it. So, I guess your silence means go do that,
Pat. Sorry about that.
No, it's all right. I am not media trained, so I probably sound super spastic and very all over the place. So here we have a blank Toon Boom stage. Like I mentioned before, grids are your best friend in regards. So we are starting the demo version of this. I don't know if there's anything else you wanted to chat before that. If I'm stepping all over your interview, the tell part of the show and tell.
No, it's all part of the process.
Okay. Is there anything you want to ask me during it that will kind of?
Yeah. This sounds great. So I saw that you posted these scenes on LinkedIn, and they got a lot of attention. How do you describe the reaction to these scenes from other industry artists?
They are mostly excited about it and kind of want to know how it's done, which is exciting, which makes me think or wonder why the hell I'm on here, like giving this away, because then my stock kind of goes down if I like give away these secrets. It's like, I'm useless after that. But it's been pretty positive, and people are kind of curious of how it happens. And, I explained it to them. They're like, oh, what the hell with that? I'm not going to draw lines for hours and days. So, all right. And it kind of, then I'm okay again. Because once you tell people the workload of it, it kind of scares them away. But the end result, like I said, it looks really great. But it's kind of trying to make it a little bit more streamlined, I guess, is the pursuit of this.
Yeah.
So it can be
describing it as like, okay, like you're sharing this and you're sort of worried about it, but then you realize this is a lot of work and other people don't really want to do it. It kind of reminds me of the Norman McLaren line of like, hey, any fool who wants to, try animation can do it. I'm not going to patent it.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't. Keeping my kids away from it. They will not be touching animation. So let's start with a grid, which is just lines. Let's do one, and then you kind of keep making more and more. This is all just like control, copy and pasting over and over again. Make like a nice grid. Then you take them and then copy and paste and spin them around. Kind of have just like this grid.
Yeah, storyboard artists love a grid.
And name it. Grid. Let's do a roof. So now you would use your layer transform. Oops, sorry. Make sure this axis is kind of in the middle. And then you take that into, let's say, like top view. So you see it over here. It's kind of facing the camera, so you don't see much of it. First of all, turn on, very important, this thing up here, 3D. There's two buttons here, 2D and 3D. 3D lets you have this this manipulator that allows you to like turn it so it's flat. And then you'd go and check your side view, and you see, oh, it's not really flat. It's kind of crooked. Move it back on the Z, and then you check your camera to see where it is. Oh, he's over here. Or below it. Move it down, and so now you have like a floor. Or I named it roof, but let's just call it a floor.
Yeah, you can rename layers.
Look, and you just move your camera, and you kind of already have instant depth. So then I duplicate this. Now let's call this the floor, as lying last time. Be the roof. So then you take your roof. Let's go to the side view again, and it's exactly on this because I duplicated it. It's laying right on top of the roof. So you move that up. Usually, I will make it a little higher, and I'll have to probably go in. So then I'll check the camera, and it's kind of tiny. Doesn't cover like the whole world or sky. So then I go in the top view. I kind of have to make it as big as possible. So then you look in the camera, it's bigger, but I want it to be higher up. So go back to your side view and just move them up. Let's move them up more. So it looks like we're in the sewer. All right, good enough. There's your ceiling. So then when we come through, look at that. Because then when it's higher up, it's further away, so it doesn't move as quickly as the ground. Say if you have a low shot, moving through, the sky kind of, it doesn't really move much. Clouds move slowly towards you, so forth,
Mm-hmm.
So you kind of have your bearings for where you live. So let's add to a wall. Let's name him Wall 1. So you go over here. Usually it's better to draw in your stage view because you get a lot more canvas to draw in rather than your camera. Typically, let's just do a rectangle. So make a rectangle, and I want to not be able to see through it, so I'll just paint bucket it white. And if you want it to look like it's moving in dimension, you kind of have to draw things on it to make it look like a wall. Let's draw a little base down here at the bottom. Maybe it's a shitty wall and it's got cracks and bricks, whatever. And let's put some windows on it. Now this is all just drawing on the same flat layer, so it exists as just this flat thing. I'll show you the other side of this. Just mirrors this. It's kind of like just like you see through it. There's a window. Make a few more windows, all in the same layer. Let's just give a little bit more difference so it doesn't look like it's the same wall going over again. Right, wall, so you know it's a wall. All right, looks like a wonderful wall. Congratulations, Pat. Like this is what it's like. It's like architecture. You're kind of just like, oh, you have the drywall up and windows, and you're just building this set kind of wall by wall, brick.
You got the scaffolding. You gotta build on top of it. Yeah.
But in real life, it's weird. I'm horribly handy. I don't do any of this stuff, which is kind of weird and ironic that I come in here and build this set where I call a handyman even if I need to plug something in, essentially. Couldn't think of a really simple manual labor. So we have our wall. Now it lives all the way over here, so let's get it to where it needs to be. Sometimes you want to turn your grid off so you can see everything. So we have our wall. Oops. When you're on the layer and then you go in these things, it's automatically toggled on for you so you can manipulate it. So now if I see the camera, it's a wall already back there. Now I want it to run along the side of us. So I'll go to top view, and you always see this green thing as your camera. Let me turn off the grid so you can see it a little bit easier. So there's your camera, and that's always the target for what you want. So now the wall is like right in front of it, and that's not what I was going for. I want it to kind of run along the left side of our screen. So I'm going to flip him around. It's a boy wall. And I'll go back, check the camera, and oh God, that's not right. It's way too big and close to the camera. So let's go back in and just move him over. And in the side view, you'll see this bounding box around it, which lets you to kind of shrink it in proportion. Otherwise, you move this one, they move whatever directions you're kind of shrinking in. But I want it to stay the same proportions. So you use that little pink bounding box to manipulate the size. Let's go back and check the camera. All right, now it's a little too far away. This is the tediousness I'm talking about. So let's bring it closer to the camera and see, okay, we have our wall. Now let's turn our graphs back on. You see you have a wall so far working with you. It's a little bit below the ground. That's all right. Let's just move them up anyway, because Pat is perfectionist. It'll drive him nuts. Perfect. Because obsessive compulsive, Pat is going to strike again, and let's make the floor grid just a little bit bigger so it extends a little bit further out into the world. All right, so it's a giant floor grid.
Hey, look at that.
It doesn't matter. So now, just for the sake of this, we'll just use the same wall and just duplicate it. So he's wall 2. And then I'll just go to top view. Let's get rid of our grid so we can see it, the thing. Go to top view and just slide him over on this side, because it kind of, like I said, it mirrors on the other side. You already have the drawing there. You don't have to draw on the other side. So now you have 2 walls. You're 25 or 50% of the way there building a room. And let's do a back one, wall 3. Now I'm going to go back up to top view, kind of flip him around, move him to the back, and just, see what we have. Oh, it's a little bit too big. I want it to be shrunk down, so I'll go to side view. Nope, you're wrong. Actually, I'm gonna go to the camera and just like shrink him down. Move him down. Now let's toggle back on our grids. Now you kind of have a room. If I move in and out, you have 2 walls, a roof, essentially, or an open air. You have an open air little room here. You can move up and down. Everything kind of stays in perspective. And essentially, this is like the rudimentary way of doing exactly what I did with that, Cyber City thing. You just build the contents and you keep building and building and building more and more objects. Because eventually, if you wanted to get to here, you could like turn down the hallway if you keyframe your camera. There's all kinds of awesome things you can do in here. Not that. I don't know what I did. Go back. Yeah, that's essentially all it really is just building in this stage view. As you look back, look, this is our stage. 2 walls and a back wall. Giant grids all over the place. We're living in, I said, a sewer.
Sort of a Tron.
Yeah. In the top view, you can't see anything. Let me go toggle these off just to show you. So our side view, all you see is this. It's basically just the right side of the screen shooting directly across, but then you go top and you see it's just 3 elements without the grids and essentially you built your little room. And if you wanted to, implement a character, I'm not doing. Hmm. Where are you? Throw them over here. That's you, Mike. Welcome.
Yeah,
Mike
I see the
here.
resemblance.
Um,
It's a little salt shaker me.
yeah. So we want Mike in front of the camera. So we have, let's bring him down. We have our top view. No, he's probably going to be too big. Oh, there he is. He's not too big. So this way, if you wanted to manipulate the camera and like lay out, like, because like I said, you don't want to animate in here, because as soon as you start chopping up the sequence, every panel this thing lives in, and it's just going to chew up your processor and drive you nuts. So normally I would take Mike and I'll just have him at certain places, and I'll bring a smaller mic just so I know how big.
So in Harmony, there are ways to have certain things like pre-render so that they're sort of cached in the background and not constantly churning. I don't know if that's in Storyboard Pro. I don't think it is.
I haven't found it yet. If it does, please send an email, because right now it's just like I wouldn't dare like chop up any of the other scenes, because I might never get the file back. My computer will just start to smoke, and God knows what else, or my fist might go through it. Any of the above options might happen, because we'll just see that beach ball of death going for hours.
Yeah, I feel like you might want to import some of these into Harmony and have like a cache on them.
Yes, there's probably, I mean, Harmony as like an actual animating software, like this isn't, like I do all my animating in Storyboard Pro right now, because it's just, like I said, I've used it for years. Like it's just so simple for me, and I know everything that I need to know. I'm sure there's so much more to discover on your wonderful software, Mike.
Pat, I wanted to ask you, do you find it difficult to stay motivated to work on personal projects while also working as an artist?
No, because like I mentioned earlier, a lot of the jobs sometimes leave me unfulfilled creatively. So it's kind of like I have kids, so I'm going to use like a kid's metaphor. That was like the vegetables to get to like the ice cream at the end of the night, where I work on my own projects, not to detriment vegetables, because somebody else's vegetables might be their ice cream, if that makes sense. Like still, I do great work, so I don't lose my job, and I want to, put the best product forward. But it was kind of, like I said, I was looking for the scratch that itch that I wasn't getting with my day job, whether, whether it's working on different camera moves or trying to explore animating in 3D space. So it was never a problem. And I grew up playing sports even at the college level, and it was always like, to get better, you kind of have to do the work, after hours, on your own time. You're not going to get better like during the game. So I kind of implemented that philosophy of like, just work on this stuff after hours. And, being a storyboard artist was kind of like this trajectory that most people are on, where you're revisionist when you get your foot in the door, then you're a storyboard artist, you work your way up to assistant director or director. And I certainly was on that trajectory, and I had enough experience to kind of allow those opportunities to be presented to me. But I knew with those bigger roles, it would kind of start to chew into and eat up my personal time, which, I've had bigger goals for myself that I didn't want to direct on. So that's why I kind of have never, I kind of stepped off that trajectory of like directing, even though a lot of my contemporaries do it. Because I've always had these specific goals that I wanted to do, and the only way to achieve them was after hours. So it was never a matter of motivation. It was always there, because if like something doesn't happen pretty soon, I'm just going to like this old guy in this industry, which is never a good thing. Petering around as like a revisionist or whatnot. I don't know. You have to stop me sometimes, because I'm just going to keep rambling, and Coherency just goes out the window. I get lost in these thoughts.
I have a philosophy that if I have a guest who's talking, I let them talk.
Please
But
stop that philosophy.
Pat, I know that you have we have to end at 5, so I wanted to ask you if you have any recent or upcoming projects that you'd like to mention to our viewers.
Currently, I would suggest everyone watch Intergalactic because it's a super unique project because it's like a rom-com and it's visually amazing, and we don't get much of that. And if Netflix sees that people are watching it, we'll do something else that's, you know, transcends our medium, which is typically used for the same kind of things. But seeing like an animated rom-com be successful, they might say, well, what about, you know, an animated horror show or whatever the hell you want to say in there, but just opens the door for more genre like projects in this medium.
So I mean, a big thing too is like animation is not a genre; it's a medium, right?
You got it. I mean, we hear that over and over again, but it's true. People, I mean, perceive everyone in our industry. We all know that. It's just we're never going to be able to show the public who consume all this stuff unless we do like these projects. I mean, it seems foreign to a lot of people who aren't in the industry that you can do these things, and they have this bias that animation is, it keeps shrugging so much and I'm hurting my neck, is for kids, and you know, they feel kind of weird watching it, but maybe if they like this rom-com, maybe they'll like this horror show, or maybe they'll like this, you know, insert genre here, whatever. We just have to make more. And
I want to sneak in one quick question from the audience. I saw that there was a question that came up of how do you pare down a big, scary portfolio when you're a student and you have like everything in there, all your figure drawings, all your life drawings, everything. How do you pare down your portfolio to a manageable thing for the job that you're applying for?
It all depends on the actual job you're going for. If you're like a newcomer to the storyboard craft in this industry, you should probably have a good idea of what kind of shows you want to work on. And we're at the point now where they're very delineated of like different types of shows, whether it's like an actual kids show or a fun cartoon like SpongeBob, or a more action heavy thing like Last Airbender. They'll look for trying to mush two thoughts together here. Keep it really small. Don't overload. No one's gonna, you kind of overburden them if you come, you know, guns blazing with 30 pieces on your portfolio. Just if you like, for instance, let's go back to Last Airbender. If you love that show, watch it, you know, study it, because all these shows kind of have a formula that they always use with every episode. Their shot list, their, you know, camera formula. So if you kind of nail that and do it with your own story, so you kind of interject some fun into it because you're telling your own stories. Just take your own stories and design it the way that Last Airbender would. And with a show like that, they want to see like gestural drawings and figure drawings, because that's a lot of what that show is fighting and gestural, and you kind of, they want to know you have a good handle on the human form. Whereas if you love SpongeBob or a Nickelodeon show, which are board driven, which means the writers will give you like an outline, just like these benchmarks of the episode they want you to hit, but you kind of have to fill in the gaps with your own gags, your own little bits of story. So practice that, you know, take your own characters and do a little scene and work on expressions, because those shows live and die on like the funny expressions and posing. You know, they're not going to care about your beautifully rendered breasts or other figure drawings.
Pat, that's great advice.
Did I answer anything?
Yeah, you definitely did. So I think we're at the end of the interview. Pat, thank you so much for sharing these scenes. And I'd like to thank our viewers for joining today's discussion. If you would like to create scenes using Storyboard Pro's 3D Stage and other tools, you can find a 21-day trial on our website at toonboom.com. Next week, we'll be interviewing Neil Hunter, the head of Algonquin College, their animation program, about advice for students interested in enrolling in animation school. So thank you so much for joining us, and be sure to tune in next time.
Bye, everybody. Oh, we're gone.